Hey, hello, and welcome or welcome back. And we're gonna check out a new spell here for the occult blood witch. And there's actually two new spells on her, but we're gonna check out just one for now, and I'll show you the other one in the next video. That way, it's not too confusing. We're just gonna deal with one right now, and it'll be a shorter video for you too. So we already have the vortex, okay, and now we've got the abyssal bolt, which is kind of like in Diablo 2, the sorceress is Ice Bolt or Fire Bolt that you get basically in the beginning of the game. And that's going to be true with her too. Like the Vortex, that's an OP spell that you're going to get much later on after leveling up. The Abyssal Bolt is something you can probably get right from the start, but of course it's going to be like a level one, and you'll have to put points into to make it better. And then we have the Bloodstone, which turns them to stone, and that's going to be probably closer to the end as well, like closer to a higher level. So we're just checking out the Abyssal Bolt in this one, so let's click that. And like I said, it's once it's selected, you right-click where you want to cast it to, and just cast right-click anywhere, and the player will turn in that direction and shoot it. And you can see the kind of particle trails. Yeah, it's got some noise on the particle system to give it that kind of magical effect. And I made it pretty cheap to cast, so we can see it. And then these guys, if I click on one of them, boom. This guy, boom. This guy, boom. Okay, so of course they're going to regenerate. And I actually have a model. I have well, it's one of these goblins actually, but I scale him up a little bit and I gave him like a ritual mask that he's wearing. So he's like a little bigger and he's wearing a ritual mask, and he's going to be the goblin priest that resurrects them like that. Die if he's around. So like he'll be one of those. You want to kill him first before you go after these guys, or he's just going to bring them back on you. Okay, so yeah, that's the Abysal Bolt, which is like a shot of dark matter at the enemy. Okay, so let's check out what's going on with that. All right, why don't we start with the prefab right here. We'll drag one in so we can see it. All this is a sphere that you would create by 3D object sphere. Okay, and then I gave it a material, the purple glow material, with the emission that is on the witch's wand I made. I showed you in the last one. And then it has a script called Abyssal Bolt, which has a lifetime, which is set to 5. So if it doesn't hit anything at all, after 5 seconds, it'll destroy itself. It's got a damage value of 20, which is what the goblin's life is, their max life is. So that's why it's one-shotting them. And then it's got the enemy layer reference because it only wants to look for enemies when it's checking its sphere collider's trigger, because its collider is set to a trigger. Okay, and if I click here, you'll notice I made it bigger than the orb itself, so it's easier to connect. Because right now it's right in front of the camera, but it's actually kind of small. If we yeah, it's really not that big. It's just right in front of the camera. So yeah, so its trigger is a collider. And on the script, like I said, it's got the lifetime and damage and the enemy layer. So once you declare this in the code, you just go in here and pick the layer you want to shoot for, and we're just looking for enemies. Everything else can go to hell, right? So just the enemies it wants to check for. And then it's got a sound audio clip public that I dragged in for the impact. And then it's got an audio source, which plays on awake, and that's the casting sound. And then the clip is the hit impact sound. So those, but it uses the same audio source to play one shot of the clip I just showed you. So as you can see, it plays on awake and it's got the casting sound. Then the particle system, that's set to world space, and the emission is the rate over distance and not time. And that way, if I grab it and move it around, you can see that kind of trail going on with particles. It's not the trail component, it's just particles. Okay, as you can see, I'm not using trails right here. So it's just the way the particles are set up. And if you want to look at the settings, we'll leave it here for a second. I mean, it's looping so that it'll keep going while the parent missile part is alive. Try to go over anything important here. The shape is just a sphere, and the radius is set to 0.01, so it's really small, so they're all kind of stay right on it. And let's see, the color over lifetime. I mean, that's whatever you choose you want your thing to be. Size over lifetime, we shrink it. Noise, yeah. This is set to 1. I think that's the way it defaulted is 1, and I left it that way. But that's what gives it that kind of wavy, magical effect when it's shooting out. And then the render. So that is the prefab for the bolt you shoot out. Okay. And if we go see the code, Abysal bolt. Yeah. So this is the code that's on the bolt missile itself. Okay. And there's that lifetime float we talked about. It's public because you saw it in the inspector and the damage. Then we declare the public layer mask and enemy layer, and I showed you that. So it only detects the enemies. We got a private rigid body we call RB, audio source we call sound, and then public audio clip hit, and that's the hit impact clip I dragged into the inspector as well, I showed you. And then the private mesh renderer mesh. Okay, so we can disable the mesh renderer. And then in the start, we declare the rigid body, the sound, and the mesh as get components and the components that we should get with them. We destroy the game object, which is the bolt, the Abyssal bolt itself. We destroy it right here and start after lifetime. So as soon as it starts, 5 seconds later, it's gonna be gone if it doesn't hit anything. And then we've got an on trigger enter, collide or other. And this checks the object layer versus the enemy layer and sees if it's on the enemy layer. And if it is, we get the other game object component AI script, the enemy AI script we've been using, and we tell it to run the function take damage, and we apply the damage we declared up top here to it. Then we play that one-shot sound hit for the hit impact because we hit an enemy. And then we stop all movement by setting the rigid body linear velocity to vector 3, 0, plus the angular velocity the same way, and then we set the rigid body to is kinematic equals true, because is kinematic physics objects aren't self-moving. Then we go to hide it from the eye while that sound's playing. And that's the only reason we're doing all this. We could just destroy it on hit, but because this sound is on an audio source on the object itself, I want it to play the sound before it destroys itself. So to do that, we got to do all this and make it stop moving. And then we hide it by mesh enabled equals false, which is the mesh renderer. And since it's not moving, the particle effect won't play, so you won't see that. And then we get the collider component and disable that. All right. And then we destroy it after 2 seconds if the 5 hasn't kicked in yet. And so no matter what, it's going to destroy itself and not stick around. And then it says the if statement checks to see if it's an enemy. Then we've got an else if after that that says if the other is not a trigger. So if it hits something solid like a wall, it'll destroy itself automatically. And that is the code that's on the projectile itself. And then in the player, we declare a public game object for the prefab. I called it Abysal Boat Prefab. And a public transform for the cast point. So I guess I'll show you that. I don't know if it's on this one or not. Yeah, it is. All right, so let's do her. All right, so cast point right here, that's the child of the Blood Witch. That's just an empty game object right here out in front of her that when she does her cast animation spell to cast it, it'll start right here. And the blue line is the forward direction of this game object. So because of the code in instantiation and initiation, it will use that to head in that direction. Okay. And that's that wand with the sphere with the same material I was telling you about. All right, so that's the cast point. Set her not active again. And what was this now? Oh, we don't need that. So that was the cast point. Oh yeah, we were talking about his code here. So yeah, cast point. Then we've got the public float for the bolt speed that we assign to it. And down the update, in this if statement that we've had for a little while now that checks for the right mouse button, input get mouse button down 1, right mouse button. We've had this stuff and spell 1 and 2 in here, and they were the vortex and the fire nova for a while. But I've added a third one now for the third spell and changed 1 and 2 to the vortex and then to the new bolt. All right, so if spell type equals 2, which if you've been following along and doing it, you've got this. And the mana, the current mana is greater than 2, so I only make it 2 to, it was real cheap to cast. Then we do the ray, so camera.main to the screen point to ray. We're getting the mouse position of where we click with the right mouse. And then we do the physics raycast and check for the ground only. And then we do vector 3 look position equals hit point. And we set look position.y to the transform position.y. We keep it at the same Y of that look position, because right now we're turning the player. So transform.look at look position. So we only want to rotate on the X and the Z to look at it and still stand up straight. So that's why we set the look transform Y to the look position Y. And then after we look at it, we play an animation called anim.playCast, and we decrease the mana cost for it. And again, we set this off in the animation. So we can go look at that real quick. Okay, so in the cast animation, if I click on events, you'll see this event here. It says cast Abyssal Bolt. And if we look at the timing for it, I'm going to guess I would have done it right about here where the arm is out. So let's see how close I am. Yeah, see? It's right there. So, you pick a good spot where your character is doing what you think it would do when it casts it, actually creates it to cast it out, and then put the event there on that frame. So that's what that does. In the event, in the animation cast, it has an animation event, and that is cast Abyssal Bolt. All right. And that on the player code, probably way down at the bottom because, of course, it is, right? Or not. Right here, cast Abyssal Bolt. Okay. So if Abyssal Bolt prefab equals null or cast point equals null, return. It's just safety null checks for that stuff. Then otherwise, game object bolt, so we create a reference to it, equals instantiate Abyssal Bolt prefab, which I showed you. And then we initiate it at the cast point position, which is the empty game object in front of the player I showed you, and the cast point rotation. Then we get the rigid body of the bolt reference we created here, and we set RB to be equal to that bolt reference's rigid body. Then we say if RB does not equal null, RB.linear velocity equals cast point dot forward times bolt speed. And so that creates the bolt and sets its speed. And the bolt speed is right there. So, I mean, we could speed it up, but I think it's just about right. All right. And so I showed you the code that is on the projectile itself. It's all right here. If you need to copy it down, you can pause it. And then you've seen what code is new in the player's code. Click to move. And yeah, should be good for that one. And if you want, I'll give you a quick preview of the stone spell, but we'll deal with how that works in the next one. But like I said, it's already done. So we'll go to Bloodstone here. Get them chasing me. Come on after me, buddies. Boom. Now they're all turned to stone. And you can see it stopped them right in their tracks. Like this one was in full run mode, and this one, his leg was up where this one's back, and it just stops their animations right in their tracks and turns them to stone. And yeah, we'll deal with that in the next one. But yeah, that's two new ones I put together for us. So we have three together, and why don't we end it by, even though they're stone, we'll go chase them. Abyssal bolt real quick one last time. Yeah, see how it's like wavy? That's the noise on the particle effect I showed you. So yeah, that's the Abyssal bolt, and next time we'll discuss the turning them to stone. So hope you're enjoying this series and this video. I want to say thank you to the subscribers. You guys rock, and if you can take a second and go click the like button, I'd really appreciate it, and it would help me out a lot. And if you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Go do it. So, until next time, peace out.